All right, before we start the discussion, what we're going to do is we're going to ask the panel some questions ourselves, and then we're going to open up to the audience a little bit later on. Here's our panel, and they will be introducing themselves as well as giving a little background information.
I'm Sister Marie Elle. I'm with the Grand Canyon Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Just a real short synopsis, we are a nonprofit organization that raises money for other nonprofit organizations.
I'm Meg Sneed. I am the board co-chair of HERO and the founder and co-director of the Right to Marry Walk.
I'm Brad Wishon. I'm the vice president of No Longer Silent, Clergy for Justice, and have been a minister in the LGBT community for 25 years.
All right, to get started and to get a little better idea about the panel, this is all of you can give your answers. What inspired you to get involved with civic engagement and social change?
I would say that after I joined the sisters to do that, I saw the things that they did in the community, the really good things that they did, so that inspired me to get involved with them. Because I've always wanted to reach out to the community, to help the community. Until I had joined the sisters, I just never seemed to have that opportunity to volunteer. And then with the sisters, I got that opportunity to do that.
Good answer, thank you.
My parents raised me to always stand up for myself, and so when I came out, I realized that I was marginalized. And so in my early 20s, I got involved by going to rallies locally, but I didn't really feel as a youth as though I had as strong of a voice. So I got involved with Soul Force's youth programs, including the Equality Ride, which was a 2-month bus trip across the country, and after that, I was hooked.
For me, I come by it a little differently. I actually, as I read the gospel, feel myself mandated to stand up for what is just and right. And so it's as much a part of my calling as it is also to stand up for myself. I too was taught that I should stand up for what is right and for those who are mistreated. And so those things converge to call me to do this.
Thank you. Sister Marie Elefant, this one, I have a question. I'd like to congratulate you on receiving the Black Veil in February 2011. And for those in the audience, you can't hear me? Okay, thank you. For those who may be unfamiliar with the Grand Canyon Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, could you tell us a little bit more about your organization as well as the significance of the Black Veil?
With the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, we've been around since 1979. It started in San Francisco when a couple of people just got together. They wanted to do something a little bit different. On Easter Sunday in 1979, they decided to go to a rally, and they dressed up as nuns because they had some nun outfits. They were actually, some of them were involved in the theater, and they had some nun outfits from the theater, and they decided, let's put these on and go out. And from there they started to become involved with AIDS because AIDS was actually starting to happen at that time. Our organization was one of the first organizations to put out a safer sex pamphlet on what to do and how to keep yourself safe because of the AIDS epidemic. Now the organization is worldwide. We have sisters in every continent except for Antarctica and Africa. And, we are a fundraising organization, but part of our motto is to all love, all joy, no guilt. So we like to go out into the community, and we want to go out into the community and spread joy, empower the people for who they are, because a lot of the times the greater community puts gay and lesbian people down as second-class citizens in that. And we want to empower people to actually stand up and be who they are and do whatever they need to do to make themselves feel better about themselves.
Thank you, that's great. So what is the significance of the Black Veil that you received?
Well, the Black Veil basically is the highest level of the organization. It depends on what house, and when I say house, every city that has a group of sisters considers themselves a house. It's kind of like a convent in the Catholic organization of nuns. And basically, there are levels that you have to go in order to become the black veil, which is the top level of sisterhood. In our house here in Phoenix, we have the aspirant, which basically that's a 2-month journey or more. In that, you're basically seeing if you want to be a sister. It's kind of you're aspiring to be a sister, and you're checking us out to see if we're exactly what you want to do and who you want to be with. Then you become a postulant, and that's a 4-month journey or more, in basically learning how to do the look of the sister. And then it's also, you're starting to get part of your ministry and go out with the sisters and participate and meet the people and meet the community. Then you become a novice, which a novice looks a little bit more like me, but they have white veils. And that just means that at this point, they've got a little bit of a voice. They can start doing things a little bit more on their own, and they're getting ready to be a fully professed sister. And then the black veil is the fully professed sister. So at this point, then I can go out and do things I need to in the community. I can create events to help fundraise, and you know, as a black veil, you're pretty much free to do what you need to yourself in the community.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing. All right, so Meg, from your involvement with Equality Ride and other movements, what can you tell us about the possible downsides of activism?
Activism takes up a lot of your time, but it's really taxing on your emotional state, and you really have to be in a good place to go out there and to do things like the Equality Ride. The Equality Ride goes to schools that will expel people for being openly LGBT. There's over 200 in the United States. And so to go into that environment and basically be shamed and told that you're sick and sinful, you have to be in a really good place. And so it can be really emotionally draining, but it's also really rewarding. So I've found that the rewards are greater than what you lose, but at times it's really, really difficult.
Absolutely. You have an article you write for Echo magazine, correct? Sneedisms?
Yes.
All right. Wasn't there an article you gave about 10 tips for activists? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. The 10 tips, it was basically just about staying true to yourself and staying true to your story, and that the most powerful way to be an activist is to tell your story, and that by telling our stories we change hearts and minds, and to just be aware of your surroundings and your audience and know that everyone's story is going to impact people differently. My story may impact somebody, but it may not touch someone else, so everyone's story is powerful. And to just be willing to go out there and get involved and to not be afraid and to not worry. People hear about activism and they think it's this scary thing where you have to be chained to the White House fence. That's one type of activism that's powerful, but there are so many other types, and so many people are activists, and you're an activist just by telling your story. So the tips were really about how to get involved and stay engaged, but really it comes down to just being who you are every day.
Thank you. Reverend Wishon, how do you approach people who identify themselves as Christians but use the Bible to promote intolerance, condemnation, and discrimination?
Well, there are a couple of things. I don't allow people to marginalize myself as a gay man or anybody else, whether that be about their race or whether that be about their religion or their sexual identity or their gender identity. However, what I've learned is, and one of the things in 2006, I was part of a walk that went from Phoenix to Washington, D.C., and we encountered a lot of fundamentalist churches. And one of the things that we learned along the way is don't presuppose the response you're going to get. Because if you do, it will be the response you get. But if you engage the people and give them an opportunity to feel comfortable enough to let their guard down, what happens is we as humans, when we let our guard down, we begin to talk on the level of being human. And when we do that, we come to a fundamental place where we can have a conversation. Now, I won't say we changed all of those churches. I wish we did. But I will say that we changed hearts and minds, and that we reached out to people in those communities that felt they had nowhere else to go. And so I think if you can engage people on that very human level while maintaining your dignity, you do not have to sacrifice your dignity to have a conversation with somebody who has a different Christian opinion. And then secondly, to tell them that their opinion, albeit they may call themselves Christian, doesn't mean that that's the only Christian opinion there is. There are a lot of us out there who disagree with them quite vociferously so.
That's great, thank you. I like how you really emphasize that we will get more change if we do a dialogue approach rather than a debate. So that's really great. This question is for the whole panel. What methods have you found to be most effective when communicating your cause?
What efforts?
What methods do you use?
Personal stories. Personal stories win every time. It's humanity. It really is about humanity. And if you can connect with people on that very deep level of sharing your truth, your authentic self, and sharing that story, that's where you win, hands down.
I agree with Brad. It is the personal stories. And once you hear someone's story, you can never unhear it, and it's planted that seed, and it will grow into change. And I think that time and time again, we see that personal stories are what change hearts and minds.
I would agree with them also, personal stories, but I have to say, too, that as a sister, the reason that they did this is because it draws attention to you. And when people see something that's peculiar, they want to ask questions. And then doing this, dressing like this, being this persona, it gives people a chance to come up to me and not be afraid to ask me questions. So this definitely is very effective for us.
I personally witnessed that when Sister Marie and I were at a table discussion regarding, I don't even remember what, HIV, I believe it was, down at ASU downtown. And afterwards, we got on the elevator, several of us, and Sister Marie was there, and an elderly woman got on the elevator with us. And she stood there for just a few minutes, and finally she turns to Sister Marie and says, "What is that all about?" And it gave you the chance to explain to her, and I thought that was a great interaction.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you as well. How has the use of social media helped or hindered your cause, considering both you and the opposition can use the same tools?
I think the other side got a big start on us. They were marshaling radio waves and television for decades before we figured out that we needed to be doing something. I think we have the upper hand on them because we are much more tech savvy. And I think that I'll turn it over to somebody younger than me to talk about the rest of that.
The social media has been a huge help in terms of activism, in terms of getting the word out and letting people know what's going on and informing people, and not just our allies, but people on the other side. I'm from a very conservative family, and they're all my friends on Facebook, and they read everything that I post. And that's how it is for everyone. And so it's really getting the word out and letting them know what's going on and letting them know our stories and hearing theirs as well and seeing what their viewpoints are so that I know how to approach that conversation. But really, since social media has come around, our numbers at rallies and events has skyrocketed.
I would actually have to agree with that. I can't quote it word for word, but I did hear somebody say that to be an activist today, you cannot not be on social media. It's just because it reaches so many people. You can put something out, and it can become viral within minutes. I think that pretty much is what it does for social change and getting the word out. When we have rallies to go to, we can say, hey, be here, and hundreds, thousands of people will show up. We're going to do a flash mob, be here, and all of a sudden that place is just mobbed with people. So social media has been a huge help to create social change and social activism.
I think that's definitely true. I mean, for instance, in the film, that's how it got started. If he wasn't writing on his MySpace, his story wouldn't have gotten out, definitely. So for the panel, what projects and initiatives are you involved with currently?
Well, I'm involved with the Right to Marry campaign, and Sister Marie is actually a route lead this year, which is very exciting. But this is our 5th year doing the Right to Marry campaign, and every year we walk the number of miles that Arizona has been a state without full and equal marriage for all citizens. And so this year we'll be walking 100 miles, and for the first time ever, we'll have 3 simultaneous campaigns in central, northern, and southern Arizona, and each campaign will walk 100 miles, and throughout the 3 campaigns, we'll visit 50 different cities in the state of Arizona, really opening a dialogue and having a conversation about what it means to be LGBT and what it means to not have marriage equality, and so we're really excited about that. Applications are actually open until February 1st. If anyone wants to be a walker, feel free to talk to me or Sister Marie about that. It's an amazing experience, and we're also looking for lots of other help in terms of fundraising, walking for a day, getting involved.
Some of the things that I'm involved in, basically, I started last year when I became a Black Veil, working with One Voice Community Center. One Voice Community Center was going through a crisis, and we saw a need for us to jump in and help them. That's actually helped me a lot in the community, and it's something that I wanted to do because I see One Voice Community Center as being something important in the community. It's become a meeting place for us to go to where we can meet with like-minded people and feel safe, not feel threatened, not be able to speak our mind or speak about who we are or what we're doing. As I also was able to become part of the steering committee for HERO, which is Human and Equal Rights Organizers. They're a social activist organization that tries to go out and bring recognition or bring to light some of the issues that are going on with right to marry, with any of the laws that are being done today, kind of basically like the laws that are going on in Tennessee. You can't speak gay. So the HERO group actually tries to go out and help people understand that those things are inappropriate and not, they basically make the gay and lesbian community feel like second-class citizens. And then the sisters, I'm also involved with the sisters highly. One of the big things that we're doing right now is we're going to be working with Take Back the Night, which actually is, I'm not sure if it's an organization, well, it is an organization, but it also is a movement that started as far as violence against women, and now it's actually spread out to violence against anybody, any domestic violence that's happening. They want to stop that. And that's pretty much what I'm involved with right now.
As all of us are, we're interconnected in many ways and on many levels through all different organizations. So I'll just talk about from No Longer Silence perspective. This year is a rather large year for us. This is the 10th anniversary of a document called the Phoenix Declaration, where 180 clergy in Arizona signed on to this document that demands full inclusion for LGBT people in church and society. This will be the 10th anniversary. We're revamping that document to specifically address the transgender community much more forcefully, and also to address issues of marriage. We'll be doing an anniversary celebration of that in September, along with a town hall in conjunction with Human Rights Campaign and a few other organizations. So we'll be working a lot on that, although I'm a board member for One Voice Community Center. I'm going to walk during the walk. I'm not going to be a walker for all of them. I'm just going to visit them in all 3 places. And there's other stuff that we can't talk about, but Arizona's 100th anniversary is coming up. Just watch out.
All right, thank you for all your input. I think now we're going to open it up to the audience as far as if anyone has any questions. What we're going to do is hand you a mic and just make sure to speak into that for us.
I just have a question, because in both yesterday's films here at the film festival and even this one here, it indicated that there was when parents get to a place where they're basically rejecting their children, and many of them become homeless or whatever. Is there an organization or whatever in Phoenix in which, or is there any way as gay citizens or whatever, that we could contribute to the financial support for children that do become homeless. I realize a lot of them have probably got issues because of all of the stress or whatever that's going on, but how financially, or is there any homes or anything like that, or halfway houses, or anything that support our youth that, let's just say, that are in the 16 to 18-year-old range?
There is 1 in 10, which does amazing things for LGBTQ youth ages 12 to 24, and they have a drop-in center for homeless youth during the afternoons. There's also the Greenhouse Project through Tumbleweed, which deals with homeless youth, and then the Out and Up Scholarship through the Maricopa County and Community Colleges for disenfranchised youth. So there's 3 different organizations that are tackling the issues that homeless youth face. But I would definitely encourage you to get involved with any of those organizations if you want to help out with homeless youth, because I do work with not homeless youth, but youth in my career, and it is a huge problem across the board, and they definitely need your help and your assistance and your love and support, because they're not getting that from other places.
Okay, don't shoot me for my question here, because I've protested with you guys, but it is a free country that we live in, and allowing people to raise their children within the religious realm that they want to, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, whatever. How do you resolve that issue when you're protesting a group and you know that the parents, for the most part, want the best and what they perceive the best for their children?
For myself, I try to be respectful to a certain point, but I also, I am an ordained clergy person, and my role is to be prophetic as well. And that means I'm supposed to make you uncomfortable if the gospel calls for that. And so, in looking out for the child's best welfare, as far as I'm concerned, the law ought to protect children from harmful therapies. I don't care what the religion says, but I do care what the professional psychological community says will happen to that child. So one, I think we advocate for laws like they're trying to reintroduce an anti-bullying legislation here in the Arizona State Legislature. Get behind it, find out about it. That's one way that we address it in schools. But then in dealing with parents, understanding that they think they're looking out for the welfare of their child. I'm less concerned about the eternal effects than I am the present effects, and that's where I would address it with them. So.
I grew up in a Catholic family, and we really accept everybody. Do you think there's a little too much of a negative connotation to the church when it comes to the LGBT community?
Why are you looking at me?
You're the reverend.
Is there too much of a negative connotation? I'm not sure if you're asking, is it an unfair one, or is it, can you clarify? I'm not sure.
Well, a lot of the media that I've seen, that it focuses a lot on the negatives of the church, when in my personal experience, I never had a whole lot of discrimination towards anybody.
I think I get you now. There's a couple of things. One, let's distinguish between Catholics and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The majority of Catholics in this country support same-sex marriage. They are supportive of LGBT individual rights. And so I think we need to separate the Catholics from the hierarchy. The hierarchy says one thing about a lot of things, about many different issues. The reality is that the people in the pew do not necessarily agree. Having said that, the hierarchy controls the money. And so, do I think there's too much of a negative connotation against the Catholic Church? Not at all. I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough scrutiny. I don't think there's enough people asking questions, because the hierarchy controls money and controls the message. And until they are challenged on a level that causes them to take a step back and rethink what they're doing, it's never enough. That's true for any church or religion, by the way, not just the Catholics.
Mine is more of a comment that kind of relates to some of the other questions here, is that the thing I thought was really missing from this film was an interview with the parents who actually put their children into that program. I think that is, I mean, they are the actors, they're the ones who made the thing happen, and I thought they were a very important sort of ingredient in the story that didn't even seem to get addressed. And what makes such thing, and I would like to see the person interviewed, not so much for what they say. I have a really kind of good sense of what they say. I'd mostly like to see them say it. I'd like to see how they say it. I'd like to see how they speak when they say it. I think that were I to have come out about my gender issues in my youth, I could very vividly see my parents putting me in something like that. And I know exactly why they would do it. Because if it got out, it would embarrass them. That for my parents, I was an object in their lives that fulfilled the snapshot of their lives, and were I to not fit that snapshot and be an embarrassment to them, they would have pulled every string they took to whip me into shape. And certainly the parental culture that was around when I was a kid was that the idea of a child coming out and expressing themselves for what they are, being what they are naturally, kind of revealing, living a life the way they saw fit, to let a child do that was the very definition of bad parenting. That in a parenting culture that my parents in, that the definition of good parenting was you whipped a child into shape. You made them conform. You made them be what they were supposed to be. And if you were seen as not doing that, then people would see you as a bad parent. And the worst fear my parents ever had as a parent wasn't their kids would get mixed up in drugs or alcohol or go off and get off and to stray off in a life that would be devastating. My parents' worst fear was that their children would embarrass them. And I really think that the driving motivation toward parents putting them into that is living in a faith culture that strictly dictates that this is the kind of person your children should be, this is the kind of life they should grow up into, and that they're feeling that, oh my God, my children are going to embarrass me. And they might rationalize this thing. I really think I'm caring for my own children, but what's actually going on there is it's self-serving. So when you kind of fight these kind of programs up front, I really think that the way you really have to tackle it is you have to educate these parents that they don't actually appreciate that they are truly being damaging in the lives of their children in pursuing their own mental image of what they think their children are supposed to be. That's more of a comment than a question. I'll phrase it in terms of question. How you guys doing?
Thank you for your comment. I found it very insightful. And we have a question over here.
You know, you've mentioned marriage equality a couple of times. Don't we agree that we'd be a lot farther down the road if marriage were not so tied to religion? And are there any activists that are really working on freedom from religion relative to that debate and to the LGBT community?
Marriage is a tricky one because it is tied to religion, and that's where a lot of the debate comes in, because marriage is seen as a religious word, and we're not fighting for a religious marriage, we're fighting for a civil marriage. The issue comes into play that marriage is written into 1,138 federal laws. And I don't know if you guys have seen how slow our government works and how long it takes them to change one law. But if we were to go and say, all right, well, everyone's going to have a civil union, they would have to change 1,138 laws. And so that's why the fight is really centered around the word marriage and marriage equality, and making sure that people realize that we're not fighting for a religious marriage, because we're fighting for a civil marriage. And also, no one can tell you whether or not you can have a religious marriage. A religious marriage is between you and your higher power and that person. No government can deny you that. What we are all fighting for is a civil marriage, And the reasons that we fight for the word marriage have nothing to do with religion and a lot to do with our country and the way that it was founded and the way those laws are written.
And to follow that up, I absolutely agree. They should all be civil marriages, and religious institutions should be able to address them as they wish. However, as a clergy person in the state of Arizona, the government dictates to me that I am an agent of the state in the course of marriage. And so therefore, I must conform to certain laws. Those laws prohibit me from presiding at any marriage that the state says is not to be a valid marriage. I don't like the government telling me who I can and cannot marry. And so for that point, as a clergy person, I actually fight for marriage because it's the way it is and because the government makes me an agent of the state in the process of marriage. So.
Hello. I kind of have it's one question, but it has two parts. One, what is gay pride? And two, what are some of the qualities or morals or ethics that define us as a community that we can all really explain to other communities and help them understand us and have our message be more clearer and more understandable? So what is gay pride and what are our qualities and morals and ethics that we should rally behind as a whole?
Well, I would have to say basically gay pride is empowering you to be a gay person or a lesbian, transgender, bisexual. Basically, it's you being out telling people, I don't care what you think, this is who I am and this is the way I'm going to live. And you can't tell me how to be because it's my choice, it's my life, and I'll do what I want. As far as what qualities, I mean, I can just go off of my perspective. What I see is we just need to start being out there more. People need to realize that gay people are everywhere. We're your next door neighbor, we're your brother, we're your sister, we are your family members, and we're here. We're here, we're queer, get over it. And when people do things like that are big names, such as the Stars and that, start coming out, and actually not being afraid of being gay in limelight because it's going to ruin their reputation, they're not going to get the jobs. When they start actually having pride in who they are and standing up for who they are, people will start realizing that actually gay people are everywhere. Our LGBTQ people are everywhere. And I mean, that's what I would think. And I think that that's what our qualities would be, is just to show people who we are. We're just as normal as they are. We're not actually that different. And our needs aren't that different.
And that there's no monolithic way of being gay. That's the whole problem with stereotypes, is that there's one way that describes everybody in this whole broad brush you're painting with. But I do think there are some core essence values, I love the second part of your question, that we can talk about. And to talk about respect for human dignity. That should not depend on anything other than human. that this is it. This is the foundation. I think that that's one that our community can call for. Creativity in the face of challenge. I think that you can look at the creativity that comes out of the LGBT community, and you can say that that's a moral imperative, that we nourish and nurture that. And I would also say that, that we find a way somehow to work together in some of the most divergent aspects of who we are as a community, that we can actually sit down and work together or stand up and demand justice together. That's all I would add.
Hi, my name is Denise. I thought my partner asked a really good two-part question, and the fact that the entire panel neglected to address the second half of the panel was quite telling. I'm an atheist, and the second part of her question was, is there any activism centered around freedom from religion as it pertains to the LGBTQ community?
Yes, there are people who approach it from a very different position. One of the things that I hate when we start talking about this idea of atheism is that somehow we're not talking about people with morals. That's not true. It is about an idea of people who don't accept the concept of God or religion the way that the dominant culture has decided. So there are people who approach this from a vastly different position, who say that we ought to dismantle the influence of religion from our political system. I would not oppose that. There are people who work on that. As far as people in our community, if I could point you to organizations, I can't in the Phoenix community. I can in the larger national community in Washington, D.C. and in other places. And if you really want connection with that. But yes, there are people who are out there who say religion has no right to have a role in our government. And I support their voice and don't necessarily disagree with them. I simply work within the system I'm in. So I'm sorry we missed that.
I'm sorry we missed it too, and I agree with Brad. I mean, I know activists that I've worked with that are atheists, and I agree with Brad as well that it should be separated. We kind of work with what we have, but there are people, I can't think of organizations that work to separate the two, because really they should be separated. I mean, separation of church and state, we talk about it all the time, and that's sadly not the reality that we live in. And it is sad, and I don't think that that's an LGBT thing. I think that that's a universal thing. That's something that everyone should realize and say, we're not a Christian nation, we're not a Catholic nation, we're not a Jewish nation. We're a nation of people, and we should support that, and we should separate church and state. But when you listen to things and you listen to people talk, it is all about Jesus, and it's all about religion, and it shouldn't be that way. So, yeah.
I would actually kind of, I guess, want to add to that a little bit more. I mean, people perceive the Sisters, because we call ourselves nuns, as a religious organization. We are not a religious organization. We actually are made up of people who have many different beliefs, from Buddhism to atheism to Muslim to many, many different religions. Some even call it fairy religion. But so we try to break away from religion as much as possible, just because, but that doesn't mean that that stops us from being spiritual. So I think people have to be careful when they want to separate church and state, because the decisions that the lawmakers make are from their morals, and those morals come from religion. So you do have to be careful when you do that. It's just spirituality and religion are two different things. So I think the Sisters, they try to come at different things from that perspective. We are not a religious organization. We don't come at things not necessarily from a religious point of view, but as from a spiritual point of view. And I think we try to promote that when we speak to people. That, you know, because somebody is putting you down because you're gay and lesbian, doesn't mean you have to step away from the spirituality, because there is something inside of you that needs to be touched. So.
Thank you for all your responses.
One more. First, I really am enjoying the panel. Thank you. I've learned about the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and why you dress the way you do, because I always wondered that. And you don't look like Sister Loretta from my 5th grade class by any stretch. So, the question I wanted to direct was to Meg. I saw the Right to Marry documentary, which I loved. I've read your things in the Echo. I really applaud what you do as a young woman. Any political aspirations? I think of Kristen Sinema a little bit, because she's like, as far as a female that has a presence in politics, and I'm thinking, look at her here.
I used to be 100% against it. I'm now about 25% against it. I don't know what the future holds for me. I do want to get more involved politically. It's been something that for a long time I shunned away from. And I went through the Center for Progressive Leadership 9-month political training, and Kirsten Sinema is actually a faculty member, and it was really enlightening to learn that system. And so it's not something that I'm totally against, but it's also not something that's on my recent horizon.
How do you combine supporting yourself with all the activism? Just as an example, I would love to do like the march and the you had mentioned like the 2-month Soul Force thing, and with any of the jobs that I've had, including the current one, I couldn't do something like that. That takes so much time, but I would love to do it.
Well, for the equality right, I quit my job and had no idea what was going to happen when I came back. So I'll be honest, I was 23 and was like, I'm just going to do this. So I was a little, just, went for it. In terms of the Right to Marry walk, I basically use all of my vacation time every year to do that. And I've been with the same company for 8 years now, and it's one of the largest nonprofits in the state. And so they support civil rights, and they support people standing up for themselves and having a voice. And so I'm incredibly blessed in that aspect that my boss and my organization support me in the work that I do, and they really support me in taking that stand. But it does take all of my vacation time. So my fiance is not too happy about that we can't do anything else, but.
And one of the things to realize is that not everyone can do those level of things, but that doesn't mean you can't do some activism on your own. You can. One of the routes of the walk will be in central Arizona, right in the valley here. Go out for a day. There'll be how many weekend days you'll be walking this year?
4.
4 weekend days that they'll be walking. So you don't even have to drive to northern Arizona or southern Arizona. There are ways to do it that don't require you quitting your job or convincing your church that leaving for 4.5 months will be a good thing for them and letting you go. I mean, so there are things that you can do on an everyday basis. And I think the way Meg started it out is probably the best thing to say. Tell your story. Be who you are. Be true to yourself. Be authentic. And that has more impact than anything else any of us can do. So
I would say the same thing. I mean, it's basically you can only do what you can do. So if you've decided, the first thing you shouldn't need to do is decide that you want to do it. And then if you've decided that you want to do it, look for those things that you can do. I mean, yes, you might not be able to walk for 10 days around Arizona, but you can always go to the rallies and be supportive at the rallies. You can go to the events that are going on and be supportive. There's things, you don't have to take a whole day off. You can maybe take a couple of hours off of work and go to something. Or go to something that's happening in the evening. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on pretty much most days of the year that you could go to, I mean, one really big thing is just maybe decide that you want to volunteer and go to One Voice Community Center and volunteer for 4 hours a day or something, or 2 hours a day, or even 1 hour a day. Or find it, if that's not the organization that touches you, that you want to work with, find an organization and then volunteer with them 1 hour, 2 hours a day. HRC has weekend events that you could go and volunteer for with them. So there's many organizations that have things going on, and you can take as little or as much time as you want.
Sermons are supposed to have 3 points. So here, I just thought of them. And this is one everybody has to do. You have to leave here today promising to do this. Repost, retweet, react, okay? That's what you have to do.
This is Meg's fiance. I actually got the microphone before she made the comments about me, but because I have a question. But I would like to comment in addition to what they were saying. I actually got involved in the 2010 Right to Marry walk because I read Meg's account in Echo, and I didn't know her at the time, and I got to know her on the walk, and the rest is history. But I was not an activist, and I'm not an activist in the LGBT community. I was more in the HIV community, and doing the walk certainly changed my life, and it changed the life of many people around me because I shared my experience with them through it, and that's I think the power of activism, or just being human, is sharing our experiences, sharing our stories. The question that I have for Meg is about Hero's involvement with the Exodus movement and the Love One Out. Can you share your personal experiences with that, as well as with Narth, since that relates to the film?
Yes, Hero and No Longer Silent and some other local groups. At the Exodus conference, Love One Out, we actually sent in 3 people, myself, Jason Hoppy, and Christopher J. Hall, into the conference. And we got to experience what that was like for a day. And Christopher went to the youth portion and got to sit with the youth, and they asked them how many of them were there by choice, and only about half of them were. And so he really got to share with them like that there are other outlets such as 1 in 10. But it was a really intense experience, and Alan Chambers was there, who you saw in the film. But along that, Hero and No Longer Silent were also outside with signs letting people know that they are loved and supported. And that was really powerful because most of the attendees were youth with their parents. And so it was important for them to hear that. And that was one of the hardest days of my life because I was undercover and couldn't speak up. But we also went to the NARTH conference, which was their international conference, and it was 3 days here in Phoenix. And we actually met the founder, who was also in the film, Dr., and I can't pronounce his last name, I'm sorry. It's very long. And he came outside and walked through the protesters that were outside as we were doing the same thing with our signs. And him and the other co-founder, Ben, walked through and stopped and talked to us and had a conversation. And I had told him, you know, your town hall said that it was open to the public, but now we're being told that we can't go, and I really want to go. And so he took us inside and introduced us to a bunch of people, and I had no idea who he was. And we had a long conversation, and he said, well, they say that you can't go into the town hall, but I'm going to set up this meeting for you. And so he did, and we met with the incoming president of NARTH, and we had an interesting and polite conversation, and they actually said to us, we have never had a conversation like this with the LGBT community. No one has ever wanted to sit down and have a loving dialogue. And that's what we had, and we didn't go in thinking that we were going to change their minds, but we wanted to have that conversation and let them hear our point of view and hear theirs, and really plant those seeds and be willing to have that conversation. So it was actually really amazing. And of course, I went up to Joe after and I said, you didn't tell me that you co-founded this organization? And he's like, oh, I don't tell people that. But so it was really interesting to have those conversations on a human level. And for me, it was interesting because I think that even as involved as I am, I might have been intimidated if I had known who they were. And because I didn't, I just, went up like a dumb blonde, like I often do, and asked really simple questions and was able to get a lot further than most people are by approaching it in a hateful way. And so that was a really amazing experience.
That's great, thank you. We have time for one more question, if anyone has one. Oh, we got one down here.
Going with the idea that there's strength in numbers, I know there's been several attempts to rally the LGBT community, into a bigger group to, fight what we need to fight, and it seems to not be working. How can we get everybody together? I know I'm on the board of PFLAG, and we reach out, and sometimes we make connections, sometimes we don't, and it just seems we can't get a cohesive group together. What can we do?
Well, first of all, don't be discouraged. It is what a small group of citizens can do that actually change the world. That's very true. Secondly, if everyone commits to finding one other person, even if you can't go, to finding somebody to go in your place, and they commit to finding somebody, it grows. And there are times when we need that. There are times when a simple presence can communicate just as effectively. But don't lose heart is the first thing I would say.
I think that something that Heroes learned during the years is that we've gotten really discouraged because right after Prop 8 and 102, we had thousands of people involved, and you just see those numbers dwindle. But what we've learned is how to make a maximum impact with a minimum amount of people, and that is totally possible. And some of our actions, we've had 5 people, and they've made national news and commentary on The Daily Show, and it's been amazing. So you don't necessarily need those numbers, but we've also started to look at ways on why people aren't involved. And one of the things that we've found by talking with people is that they think that it's scary. And so we've started Camp Hero, which is a 20-hour training on how to be an advocate. but it's a lot more about how to be an advocate for yourself and for others, and that doesn't necessarily involve getting arrested, that there are lots of ways to be an activist and lots of ways to be involved in the community, whether it's being a sister or being with PFLAG or being a drag queen or any of those things is being an advocate and getting your story out there. And so camp is February 24th through 26th, if anyone wants to attend. It's an amazing intro to activism and advocacy, and it's going to be an awesome weekend. And so as Hero, we really are trying to figure out why people aren't involved and engaged and what we're doing and where we're lacking and where we can step up to get people involved. So that's our step right now.
And what I would add to that basically is what we've seen as an organization is that organizations tend to be too independent instead of working together. So you said you're with PFLAG, and I know our organization has reached out to many of the community organizations here. And I think that is basically what we've got to start doing as organizations, is reaching out to the other organizations. We're all in this for the same thing. We're trying to do the same thing. So why not work with each other to do that instead of repeating what somebody else has already done? So, I mean, that's pretty much the only way that we're actually going to get the groups of people that we need and become a cohesive body, is just to reach out and make sure that everybody feels included. And just because they say no, you've at least opened the door to them to say yes at another time, if you've reached out to somebody or to an organization to include them in that.
Great. Well, thank you to the panel for coming here today and for everything you do. And thank you to the audience for staying and asking some questions. I hope you're able to stick around, enjoy some of the vendors and what they're selling, the food, and some good films later on. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.